Hi everyone, it's JB from the Jet PM team. We've been getting a few questions lately about how to interact between modules in a Jet application. So say you've got a pull-down menu or some sort of a selection menu up in the header or the banner at the top, and you want some selection from that to interact with one of the modules that's down in the main part of the app. So maybe the dashboard, for instance. So let's go ahead and take a look at some code and show how we can do that. This is just a normal Jet starter template, and so we want to go ahead and this is the index.html, and I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'm in VS Code, so all I'm going to do is just pop up the terminal down here and run ojet serve, and that will build it and fire it up on a browser for us in just a second. There it is. So this is just a standard Jet starter template. It's got all the different pages that you would expect. On the dashboard, what I want to do is take this pull-down menu, and when we select something off it, say we select help or something like that, change up the text down here in the dashboard. So if we actually look at the code for a Jet template, you'll notice that index.html is the shell, the outer area of the app, if you will. It has the header, and it also has a main navigator, a main section here. Where is it? Right here, OJ with the role of main, and that's just an OJ module, and then it has the footer. So all of that dashboard and incidents and those types of customers and about pages, those are all being loaded into this OJ modules. And that is a separate element. That actually has its own context. It has its own view and view model and so forth. So how do we actually interact between this outer shell and what's going on inside of that view model? So the first trick on all of this is to look inside of the header, and we find this menu right here. So this is the menu that we looked at just a second ago that does this pull down stuff. If I want to do something with this or have some sort of an event fired when that menu changes, I can just add in an on OJ action equals, and we'll bind that to, say, a selection changed handler. Some name. You can give it any name you want, but let's just call it that for now. So we're going to put that in there, and now we're going to say that every time something changes, this event, this OJ action is going to be fired. And when that is fired, we're going to go off to this handler, this callback method. So the view model for the outer controller or the outer shell of the app is the app controller. So inside of this, here's all of our setup with our different defined block and so forth, and here's all of our router setup and some of our media queries for our responsive JavaScript. So let's get below all of our router stuff, and let's go right in here, and let's just say self dot the selection change handler equals function, and it's going to have an event returned from it. And we'll say something like this, and we'll say console.log. And inside of there, we'll say selection is, and we should be able to get the event.detail.value, I believe. And we'll take a look at that. Actually, it's not detail, it's target. Okay. So we'll do that. Make my linter happy by adding in a few semicolons. Okay, let's save that. Now, if you notice, I've been having this running the whole time, and every time I've made a change, it actually comes up and says that it's doing a watch. So if I come back and I bring up my developer tools, now when I make a change here, yep, it does exactly what I expect. I just click on sign out. It says that the value is out. Here it says the value is help, and so forth. So it's getting the value now when I change. So now I've got the first piece of the puzzle, if you will, is how are we going to actually get the value or the when this is changed over here. So we've got that working. Now what we want to do is standard JavaScript eventing. So we're going to work with events, and when this is actually changed, we're going to turn around and fire an event that we can, and we're going to pass in the data that we want to pass as part of the body of that event. And then in other sections of the app, we can listen for that event. So let's see how we do that. I have a little bit of a cheat sheet in here where I've done this event stuff in a little bit earlier. So I'm going to grab that really quickly. And after our target thing here, we're just going to pop that in there. So what I'm doing is I'm defining an object called params. I'm telling it that bubbles equals true because we want our event to bubble through. We're going to actually attach our event on a specific DOM element, and then we want it to bubble up through the other DOM elements. And you can control the specificity of your events as to whether you could just stick this directly off a document, or you can come a little bit deeper down into it. In this case, I know that inside of index.html, there is a div here with an ID of global body. Now, there's the head, there's a few other things going on here, but inside of this little div is pretty much the contents of the entire app. So that's the whole thing. So if I fire an event here, I know that everything inside of that is going to be able to listen for it. So just so you know where I got that DOM element from. So I've set up my parameters. Under detail, I'm setting an object or a key called data, and I'm just assigning in that event target value to data. Then I'm going to dispatch and a new custom event called selection update, and I'm going to pass in my parameters. So this is all just straight JavaScript events. This isn't anything specific to Jet, so there's nothing radically different here. So now every time that we make that change on the menu, it's going to fire an event and it's going to send off the value of that we were doing with this console.log. So let's save that. Now over in the dashboard, we currently just have some text in here. So let's replace this div with a kind of an OJ text binding, right? Or an OJ bind text. So if we say OJ bind text and we say value equals, let's bind it to a variable called val, something that simple. And in dashboard.js, which is the view model for it, we'll simply say self.val equals knockout observable. And let's set a default, nothing selected. So now just with that change, so just with the binding this text to val and setting the variable in the background, if we come back over, you'll now see it just says something, nothing selected. Let's make that a little bit easier to read by saying, let's see, go back over here to dashboard. So let's go here and say that we want selection is space. We want the value of val, not. There we go. So it's just going to make it a little nicer to read. So when we come back now, it says selection is nothing selected. And if I come over here, nothing happens. See? And so what's going on is it is doing the eventing, it is doing the dispatch, but we don't have anything listening for that yet. So let's go back to our code now, and we'll go to dashboard.js. And again, I'm going to go to my cheat sheet. And we've already set up the val, so here's what we're going to do right here. So over here, we're going to say on the same element again, we're going to do an add event listener. Now you could, I could actually say listen for an event more specifically just within my own view model. That's fine. And again, it doesn't matter. In this case, I'm going off the same one. And now I'm adding an event listener. and I'm saying listen for that selection update, which over in App Controller, that's what we called this event that we're dispatching is selection update. So now we're just listening for that. When we get that event, call this callback function. So this is our selection handler, okay? And this is our function right down here, and we're just going to reset val to event.detail.data. And remember, in our parameters, we set data as our key. So we can turn around and listen to that. So save that, come back over. It says nothing is selected, which is our default. We click on About. Look there, selection is About. Click over here, selection is Out. So now this is a very, very simple example, but it shows how you can communicate between different modules. Now this can work in any different way of doing things. If you had multiple OJ modules nested within each other and things like that, you could still do it with event listeners. So event development or event coding and coding by event or development by event, eventing is actually a really cool thing to do. And it's all standard JavaScript. There's really nothing specific to Jet here. So how did I figure all this out? I'm going to show you this. It's one thing that I just kind of showed you the code, and hopefully you can use this code and so forth. But what were the resources that I used to figure all of this out? If I come back here and I look at the index.html originally, I know that that menu that I had this is just an OJ menu, and it's actually inside of an OJ menu button. So I went to the cookbook, to the Jet cookbook, and I went to a menu button, and I looked at the demo here, and I said, how are they actually getting this value? When this changes, how are they actually doing that? And I looked down here in the code, or actually up here, and I saw that they had an on OJ action, and then they had this menu item action. So that's how I knew which event was actually the one I needed to kind of stick a handler on. And I looked down here in the code again, and I saw that once that event was done, they were calling event.target.value. Most of the time, you're going to find event.detail. And so this tripped me up. When I first wrote it, I wrote it event.detail, and it didn't work. And then when I did some debugging on it, I found that I had to do event.target. And I also came in and looked at the demo and saw that they were doing that. So this is the resource that I used to figure that part out. Now, after doing that, I needed to figure out the eventing. Now, you could go off and look at any JavaScript event documentation and figure it out that way if you wanted to. But it turns out that we actually have something in the Jet Developers Guide. Under accessibility of all things, there is a thing that you can do with your application, and you should be doing for accessibility, is using a thing called live region. It's an ARIA live region. And this is the way that you can send messages or send text off to an assistive technology like a voiceover or something like that that will actually listen to those changes. So when you change pages in a single page app, the URL doesn't change. So the person who may be blind or visually impaired, they don't know that the page changed. So you can set up an event that will dispatch off a message saying such and such page loaded, and that can change the value of an ARIA live region, and the assistive technology will automatically read out that information. So we can take advantage of this information in here where we actually document setting up, here's adding the event listener inside of our document, and here's the callback method, or the event handler function rather. And then here's the information where it actually set up the parameters and it dispatched off this announce message. So these are the resources that I've used. I've used a developer guide, the Jet Developers Guide. I've used the Jet Cookbook to find out some samples of how things might be done with a specific component. And then just standard JavaScript knowledge and figuring out how all of that works. So hopefully that helps others. Again, it's pretty simple to work with. You can pass any type of data off this. So I know in one specific instance of where someone was asking for help on this, they had a pull-down menu, and when they clicked on it, they wanted to populate a table with new data. Well, the same thing in the code is simply come over to your dashboard code, and when you have the event being fired on this listener, when you hear the event in here, you would simply get the new data and do a get JSON with the new data handle and update your data provider. So the same kind of thing can be done, and you can do some pretty advanced stuff, and it's just up to you on how you want to write your code. Hope that helps everybody, and thanks for listening.